ETH is pumping. But XRP holders? You need to pay attention. Ethereum is soaking up the headlines, but here's the part nobody's telling you. That wave of institutional money Tom Lee just lit up with Ethereum? It's only phase 1. And if you're holding XRP right now, you better listen closely, because the next leg of this liquidity cycle could change everything. Yes, we're seeing record-breaking ETH ETF inflows. Yes, Wall Street is falling in love with Ethereum. But this isn't just about ETH. This is about what comes after Ethereum gets pumped to high heaven. Because smart money never stops at one stop. It cycles into the next undervalued asset with the most upside. And guess what's been coiling up for years now, stuck in regulatory limbo, overlooked, misunderstood, while building real infrastructure and landing deals with central banks and global payment corridors. You already know the answer. XRP. And here's the twist, the very same institutions pumping Ethereum right now. Many of them already have XRP on their radar. Some even hold it quietly. So when someone like Tom Lee, one of the most influential Wall Street strategists in crypto, starts buying billions of Ethereum, you better believe XRP is on the board next. So let's break this down. Because we're not just talking hopium here. We're talking about how the Ethereum pump leads directly to an XRP explosion. And why Tom Lee might just be the match that lights the next altcoin firestorm. But before we dive in, if you hold XRP, HBAR, XDC, or any utility asset, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because the moment the shift happens, you're going to want to be ahead of the crowd, not chasing after it. Let's get into it. Tom Lee didn't just randomly load up billions worth of Ethereum. This wasn't some crypto influencer FOMOing into ETH after seeing a few bullish tweets. This was a calculated macro play with timing so precise, it borders on insider intuition. Tom Lee, former JP Morgan strategist, Fundstrat founder, and one of the most respected voices in traditional finance, made a deliberate move through BitMine Immersion Technologies. Not with a tweet, not with a blog post, but with cold, hard capital. While the entire crypto community was arguing about meme coins, ETH gas fees, or SEC lawsuits, Tom Lee quietly accumulated over 560,000 Ethereum. That's more than the Ethereum Foundation itself holds right now. Think about that. One fund just leapfrogged the creators of ETH in ownership. At today's prices, that's over $2 billion in Ethereum sitting in his treasury. And the kicker? He did it before the ETH ETF inflows even began. Before the headlines. Before the hype. Before the liquidity wave. Why? Because Tom Lee doesn't follow the market, he front-runs it. He knew what was coming. The moment BlackRock, Fidelity, and the TradFi juggernauts opened the floodgates for spot Ethereum ETFs, there would be a tsunami of capital, not just retail FOMO, but massive institutional flows hungry for blue-chip crypto exposure without touching a private key. And Tom didn't just want a piece of that, he wanted to own it. He literally said he wanted to buy 5% of all Ethereum in circulation. That's not just bullish. That's a declaration of war against ETH's available supply. Because when someone with macro foresight, deep Wall Street roots, and a $2 billion war chest says he wants 5% of all ETH, he's not just talking about a price target. He's orchestrating a supply squeeze. And here's where it gets strategic, because this is where XRP holders need to start paying attention. This play isn't about Ethereum in isolation. It's about liquidity positioning in crypto's boom-bust cycles. Every single time a bull market kicks off, we see the same choreography, the same three-phase liquidity cascade. Phase 1, Bitcoin rips first, driven by narrative, ETF hype, or macro headlines. Phase 2, Ethereum follows, catching institutional flows, ETF inflows, and smart contract speculation. Phase 3, the spillover, where large-cap altcoins with strong fundamentals like XRP soak up the next wave of liquidity. That's the pattern. Over and over again. 2017? Bitcoin ran first, then Ethereum, then XRP did a 100x. 2021? Bitcoin dominance spiked, ETH rotated higher, then alt season hit, and XRP surged despite an SEC lawsuit. It's not a guess. It's liquidity physics. It's capital behavior, and Tom Lee knows it better than anyone. Because here's what most investors miss. Institutional liquidity doesn't enter the market all at once. It comes in waves. It allocates in stages. It starts with safety, then chases yield. So when ETH begins soaking up ETF flows, retail will follow. the Ethereum price will spike. The RSI will scream, overbought. And at that point, smart money rotates out. Not into meme coins, not into vaporware, but into undervalued, high-utility assets that haven't pumped yet, the assets that are next in line to absorb excess liquidity. And that's where XRP steps in. While Ethereum gets crowded, XRP is sitting in the perfect position. Regulatory clarity, thanks to the Ripple versus SEC ruling. Real-world utility across banks, institutions, and cross-border payments. Undervalued market cap compared to its 2018 highs. New catalysts like Rust stablecoin integration and global corridor expansion. Tom Lee's Ethereum accumulation isn't just a bet on ETH. It's phase one of a much bigger liquidity strategy. He's building the first wall, the pressure valve. But that valve is going to burst wide open, and the capital will overflow into assets like XRP. Because here's the thing. Once ETH is flying and retail is scrambling to buy the top, funds like Tom's will already be rotating into the next asset. And when the institutions start asking, what's the next ETH? They won't be looking for hype. They'll be looking for functionality, regulatory safety, and adoption. XRP fits that mold perfectly. But before XRP takes center stage, we need to fully understand how this capital rotation works. Because this isn't random. This is engineered liquidity sequencing, and we're going to expose exactly how this smart money flows downstream from ETH to XRP, and what signs to watch before it happens. If this is already blowing your mind, hit that subscribe button right now. Because the next sections are going to show you exactly when and how XRP could be the biggest winner of this entire ETF-driven bull cycle. Don't miss what's coming. The liquidity spillover effect. How ETH's boom sets XRP up for explosive growth. Let's get real. Tom Lee's $2 billion Ethereum bet isn't just about profits from ETH. It's about front-running a liquidity wave that's going to reshape the entire crypto market over the next 6 to 12 months. You've heard the phrase liquidity trickle-down, but let's call it what it really is. A capital explosion with Ethereum as the fuse, and altcoins like XRP sitting directly in the blast radius. So how does this work? When institutional players like Tom Lee accumulate billions in ETH, and ETFs push Ethereum into price discovery, that drives media coverage, influencer hype, and retail FOMO. Suddenly, Ethereum goes from undervalued tech play to overvalued bubble risk, and whales start to rotate their capital. They don't exit crypto, they reallocate into large caps with better upside. And here's the key. Ethereum might go 2x or 3x from here. XRP, sitting under $4, it can go 10x before it even returns to its 2018 highs. That's not hopium. That's math. And guess what happens next? That same institutional capital that entered ETH through ETFs starts quietly flowing into XRP, HBAR, XDC, and similar utility networks. We've seen this movie before. Back in 2017, XRP exploded after Bitcoin topped out. Why? Because investors were searching for the next big thing with lower market cap and bigger room to run. Ethereum is the gateway. XRP is the destination. Now let's add another layer. Tom Lee isn't just betting on Ethereum. He's also heavily involved in macro investing. He understands sector rotation better than most people in crypto even realize. He knows when an asset is fully priced in. And that moment is coming for Ethereum sooner than most think. You see, BlackRock, Fidelity, VanEck, they all lined up to launch ETH ETFs. But what happens when inflows slow? When fees plateau? When ETH hits resistance above $5,000? That's when the spillover begins. And you want to be in front of that wave, not chasing behind it. And that's where XRP comes in. Unlike Ethereum, XRP hasn't reclaimed its previous all-time high. Unlike Ethereum, XRP hasn't even had an ETF narrative yet. And unlike Ethereum, XRP's fundamentals are stronger than ever while the price is still heavily suppressed. This is what smart money looks for. Tom Lee and his peers understand. You make wealth not by buying the top-performing asset, but by rotating into the undervalued, overlooked one right before its breakout. And XRP fits that mold perfectly. But there's more. Because the XRP ETF narrative is already brewing behind the scenes, and when that hits, it's game over. Let's talk about that next. The XRP ETF Narrative, the next institutional frontier. If you think ETFs are the end of the story, you're not thinking like Wall Street. Because here's how the game really works. Phase 1, Bitcoin ETF opens the door. Phase 2, Ethereum ETF proves the model. Phase 3, utility altcoin ETFs take over. And XRP is number 1 on that list. Why? Because XRP is the only major crypto with legal clarity in the US thanks to the Ripple versus SEC case. That court ruling already made it clear, XRP is not a security when traded on secondary markets. That's a massive green light for ETF approval, especially once the regulatory plumbing catches up. And here's what most people don't realize. BlackRock didn't just file for a Bitcoin ETF. They didn't just file for an Ethereum ETF. They filed for a tokenized assets fund. And guess what assets are positioned perfectly for tokenization? XRP, XLM, HBAR, XDC, XRP especially, thanks to Ripple's push into stablecoins, central bank integrations, and cross-border payments. The Ripple Liquidity Hub, the upcoming Rust stablecoin, and their acquisition of Hidden Road, a prime broker for institutions, all scream one thing: ETF-ready infrastructure. So here's what's brewing behind the curtain. Cache gets overbought. Capital starts rotating. The SEC gets pressured to approve other ETFs. And XRP is the first utility token in line. You think Tom Lee doesn't know that? Of course he does. And when XRP gets its ETF moment, even if it's months from now, the surge will be unlike anything we've seen before. Why? Because retail isn't even watching XRP right now. And that's exactly when whales like Tom Lee start accumulating. Before the news. Before the hype. Before the breakout. This is how the game is played. But while everyone watches ETF headlines, something far more powerful is being overlooked. Real-world utility. And that's where XRP blows Ethereum out of the water. Let's talk about that next. XRP is quietly positioning for the endgame. This is the inflection point. While the entire market watches Ethereum pull off the greatest ETF liquidity arbitrage in crypto history, XRP is doing something arguably more strategic and more dangerous to the traditional system. Let's put this into perspective. Ethereum is being treated like the institutional choice because it's the easiest compromise. BlackRock, Fidelity, and VanEck can say, "Look, we're modern. We're in crypto, but we're doing it safely." They're not disrupting anything. They're reinforcing the existing financial plumbing, just with an Ethereum front end. But XRP threatens the back end of finance. It's not about yield farming, staking, or meme coins. It's about nuking the SWIFT system. It's about obliterating correspondent banking. And it's about giving institutions, central banks, and cross-border payment hubs a blockchain-native liquidity mechanism with no middlemen. One that's already ISO 20022 compliant, already working with banks, and already tested in dozens of countries. And that, right there, is the final domino Wall Street doesn't want to talk about. Because once Ethereum ETFs succeed and prove demand is real, institutions will start asking the next question. What's more efficient? What's more regulatory ready? What's already integrated with financial messaging standards? What's already signed MOUs with banks, governments, and liquidity hubs? What solves real problems like Nostrovostro bottlenecks and multi-day FX settlement slippage? That's not Ethereum. That's not Solana. That's not Cardano. That's XRP. And guess what? That shift has already begun. Ripple's acquisition of Hidden Road. Rust stablecoin launching on XRP Ledger. Liquidity partnerships with central banks in Asia, Africa, and LATAM. Compliance rails already in place, thanks to RippleNet's design. Hooks, AMM, and liquidity routing upgrades already live. This isn't a test net. This isn't theoretical. This is monetary infrastructure being rebuilt in plain sight. And when the next liquidity wave hits, and it won't just be Ethereum catching the tailwind. Tom Lee said this is the decade of exponential upside. He's right, but what he didn't say out loud is that Ethereum is the warm-up act. XRP is the main event, and most retail investors are asleep. XRP is where infrastructure meets institutional capital. This is your window. So let's break this down one last time. Tom Lee didn't say XRP directly, but he laid out a liquidity thesis that XRP is perfectly positioned to benefit from. His call? Ethereum spot ETFs could 10x capital inflows. Ethereum could flip Bitcoin as the market leader. Wall Street is coming with trillions on standby. But the overlooked angle is this. XRP is the bridge asset. XRP is the neutral rail. XRP is the one protocol engineered to plug into this institutional wave and translate it into real-world liquidity. This isn't about hype. This is about positioning. It's about being early, when no one else sees what's coming. When Ethereum surges from ETF momentum, XRP becomes the next logical allocation. It's already happening behind the scenes. The smart money is front-running the next trend, compliance-first infrastructure tokens. And let's be clear, XRP doesn't need hype to pump. It just needs access. And now, for the first time in history, that access is opening up. Wall Street liquidity, Ethereum ETFs, infrastructure tokens, XRP's moment. So, while the masses chase trends, the real money is watching rails, not narratives. And if you're paying attention, you're early. If you hold XRP, this is not the time to second-guess. This is the time to go deeper, learn faster, and stay laser-focused. Because when the switch flips, and it will, you won't have time to reposition.